Anjali from Group Bytes. So, welcome to one more episode of Expert Speak session. So, before we begin today's session, I have a question for you all. Do you remember the last time you made someone laugh? Yes. Well, we all know how to cheer up someone, isn't it? We could do all those small little things and probably lift up someone's mood. It's easy to cheer up someone, but making someone laugh, well, I think it's not that easy. But we do have folks who are experts and who know how to make people laugh. Yes, I'm talking about the stand up comedians who mastered the art of making people laugh. Well, my today's guest is a stand up comedian and he has been doing open mix and live performances close to 4 plus years. And some of you might have also watched him on Comicstaan. Yes, I'm talking about Shankar Chugani. So Shankar has been doing comedy for almost four plus years, and I think some of you might have watched him on Comicstaan, or some of you might have watched his live performances. Well, if you haven't watched any of your performances, please go take a look at some of his performances. I'm sure it's gonna put a smile on your face. Well, in today's episode, let's talk to Shankar and learn from him how he got into this profession. And I'm sure he's going to give a lot of tips and advice for all those who are getting started in this profession or just trying to know what this profession offers for all those funny bones out there. Well, let's get started. Hi, Shankar. How are you doing? And it's really nice to have you today. And thanks for joining me.
I'm good. I'm well. What about you? What's up with you?
So I have read a lot of stand-up comedians who landed into this profession, started off either by quitting the job or as a side hustle. So that's what I read. Okay. So what's your story?
Mine was side hustle as well because um, I come from a middle class house, so there is no. I'll stop earning money and then follow my dreams. I constantly had to make sure that I'm earning a living for myself and for my family. And I was doing stand up every evening. Instead of going home, I would go to a open mic and do stand up and then go home. So for about 4 years, that was the case.
Okay. So what were you doing? What was your full-time job then?
I switched a couple of jobs. I was a copywriter in an ad agency here in Bangalore. And then I was working at Jagriti Theatre as a communications executive. I was handling their social media, their website, their PR, front office, front of house, backstage, the whole bunch, everything that comes with a performing space. I was involved with that. So that was about 3 years. So these were the two jobs that I was doing on the side while I was doing stand up.
So my question for you is making people laugh is not the easiest thing to do. And I think it needs a lot of conviction to consider comedy as a profession. So, how did you discover your passion for comedy?
As a child, you think you're funny, and then you go through situations. Sometimes people laugh at you, and sometimes you make a joke that people get and they laugh. So you think you're funny, and once you start going to open mics, it just gets addictive, and you can't stop. So it only after about 8-9 months going into open mics, I was thinking, oh, now I don't know if I can stop. I'm just gonna keep doing this. So the obsession with stand up never stopped. I started watching stand up specials. I started watching stand up comedians perform. I started writing down what I thought was funny, and then I just kept going to open mics. As still the case, only the pandemic has stopped regular open mics. Otherwise, for about 6.5, 7 years, we were doing stand up at open mics every single day.
So, I want to know what's your ideating process? Like, how much time you spend writing bits?
It's a very scientific process. I wake up every Tuesday wondering what problem of the world bothers me. No, I'm kidding. I have no writing process. I envy people who can sit down and write what's there. Uh, I wouldn't want to show how messy my room is, but on my cupboard, on the floor, I write down a whole bunch of words that I like, and I go through that throughout the day. Let me quickly just show you one thing. You know the computer keyboard table where you used to keep a keyboard. I've given up my desktop a decade ago, so I took this out and I use this as a whiteboard to write my ideas down, and I just keep it on the side, and I right thinking looking at that. So there is no process. Just once I think about something funny, I write it down so I will never forget, and then I go on stage and I try and see how I can make that funnier over the course of a couple of weeks.
Okay. So, my question for you is, how do stand-up comedians memorize the long hour bits? Like, let's say, if you have to perform a 15 minutes or 20 minutes act, do you follow any memorization techniques, or you just get on the stage and probably, talk whatever is funny? How do you go about performing such long hour acts?
It varies. Like I know some comedians who can write down what all they want to talk about in an order, and they will not change the order. That's exactly how they will perform. But it's like any kind of mnemonic that device that you use to remember things. You come up with a bunch of ideas that you think go well, and you remember that any which way you think is the best way to remember it. So there's no way you can write down the first letter to make a word, or you can uh, make one thing common in all five of those topics, and keep all five of them under one bracket. Whichever idea, whichever method works, you use that to remember what you want to talk about. And I've realized that the more I go prepared with something set in mind, the more rehearsed it looks.
Okay.
But as well as if I'm wanting to tell you a joke that it feels like I'm saying it for the first time, then that works better. And you cannot practice how to say something for the first time. That defeats the purpose of saying something like it's said for the first time. So I don't want to get tied down to what I've written as words. I want to know what's funny and then talk about it on stage. So it's almost like you're trying to fly. You jump off a helicopter, and on the way down you realize that you don't have a parachute. So you're looking for parachutes, and you manage to grab one and strap it on before you crash. If you land, the people laugh. If you crash, people just look at you like you've cheated them, and then you start the process all over again. So that's how I feel.
Okay. So, how does it feel like to bomb on a stage as a comedian? Like, how do you handle silence and probably, encountering those awkward moments?
That happened for so many occasions. At so many occasions, I have said something that I thought was incredibly funny, and nobody got it. And I don't remember. Sometimes you try and address what you said wasn't funny. Sometimes when you first start out, you try and quickly jump to the next joke without addressing what you said, and it only takes a while before you realize that if something doesn't work, it's fine. You don't have to get up on stage and try and hit every joke every single time the best way. Every time I have done something that has gotten a laugh, for that to happen, I have tried that joke out at least 40 times for it to not work.
Okay.
So there's a lot of silence. But as long as you're okay with the silence, as long as I am on stage trying to make you laugh, and if you find something unfunny, if you're silent, then that gives me a chance to still tell you something new and try and make you laugh. But if I then forget, and if I try and keep going with a joke, then the whole show kind of goes bad. But if I loosen up and I say, hey guys, sometimes things don't go great for you as well. So it's not like I promised you that for what price you paid, I'm going to make you laugh constantly, non-stop for 60 minutes. And you find your way, and you somehow get back. I always also try and remember that when an audience comes, or when you're performing for an audience, only one or two times the audience is hostile and they hate you. Otherwise, the audience wants you to do well. So, although if you don't do well, they see that also as entertaining, because they're all like, hey, watch him get all awkward. But as long as you're comfortable, they have a big sigh of relief that I can handle not doing well sometimes. It's just part of the game.
Okay. So tell me about a few things that you learned hard way in this profession. Like talk about your initial lessons and how tough it was for you to perform or when you just started off doing the open mix.
Going back to the previous question, what happens when people don't laugh? When you're first starting out, you get all the more nervous, and audience looks at you and they get nervous, and there's no way for you to finish well. If you go and listen to some of the first couple of audios, you don't have laughs. It's just a nervous guy trying to tell the crowd that uh, he has something funny to say. So one of the biggest lessons I've learned is to try and not be on stage like it's the end of the world if the show doesn't go well. Like I'm all up for trying and making sure I do my put my 100%. But if I'm on stage and if I'm trying something and if it doesn't go well, instead of trying to beat myself saying I should have done better, I tell myself, it didn't go well. Here's another joke coming up. Let's see if we can try and get this to work. So initially, that if you don't do well, that hovers over the rest of the show. But how quickly you can recover from that is the learning that you get as you get better or as you spend more time doing stand up. Now, I'll stick to that one lesson that I learned very hardcore over the time. Stage time or getting up on stage as often as you can has is one of the best. Like, there's no other way to improve in this. You can't keep writing for a decade and then come and suddenly get up on stage. The more often you get up on stage with improved bits, the more progress you're making.
Okay. So whose work inspires you in this profession? Whom do you look up to? Who are your favorites?
There are so many names. Uh, I I look up to in the Indian circuit. I look up to Kanan Gill. Uh, I'd say Anirban Das Gupta, Sumit Anand, Shashwat Maheshwari, Kel Traced. These are some of the comics that whose work I look at and I appreciate, and I'm like I it's a little it's a puzzle of how they are putting in their work, and I'm watching what they're doing, and it's incredible. Internationally, the list goes even bigger, like from Sarah Silverman to George Carlin to Richard Pryor to Patrice O'Neill to Dave Chappelle to Bill Burr to Paula Poundstone to so many names. And the list is endless. Which is like on my Instagram, I put out specials as highlights of comedians that I really, really appreciate. And at this point, I think I've put up 60 posters of different comedians as a highlight. And the name Greg Giraldo, um, Dave Attell, so many names of comedians who have done such a great job of being a comedian that it's light years ahead of so many other comedians that I know.
Okay. So how was your Comicstaan experience? Like, has it changed anything? And what's next? Like, are you working on something? What are your current projects?
It did it did change, but okay. So like I said, for 4 years I was doing stand up on this in the evening hours, and I was having a full time job. Now, what happened on Comicstaan wasn't written over a week. I had been working on jokes for a couple of years, and finally, when the right platform was there, I told my jokes. Although in that week I tried to bring the best out of those jokes for the duration that was allowed. Um, so when Comicstaan got over, I started writing new jokes with the hope that when the show comes out, people will come to watch me, and I need to have an act that I can perform live for the crowd for 60 minutes. The best way that I can explain this is when I started going to open mics, it felt like I am learning how to cook. And it took me a long time to learn how to cook, say, lasagna. And I made a great dish of lasagna and I served it, and people liked it. And they were like, hey, can you give us something else? And I said, yeah, you should give me enough time for me to go and prepare in the kitchen, because I cannot serve lasagna that's good and then go into the kitchen for half an hour and come out with biryani. It's not going to taste good. You know the amount of time you need for it to become better or for you to serve it to other people. So after Comicstaan, I kept doing open mics and shows in Bangalore and in Bombay, and I did, I think, two tours across the country. uh, I call them, name of the show was Selling Myself Short. That was the, I did about 7 cities twice. But even now, my whole drive is to do live stand up. What I can put out on any platform uh, is something that I can answer only when I do enough live shows for me to be happy with something that I can put it online for people to watch. I don't want to put out something and then 6 months later I think I could have changed that joke or I could have said something here and then go back and change it. Doesn't make sense. So for the people who watched my show on Prime and they've come to watch me live, uh, if I'm more satisfied when they come and watch me and they say, hey, you were hilarious today. Sometimes people think they're giving me a compliment when they say, hey, you were funny on Comicstaan after watching a live show. It isn't a compliment. It feels like they watched the show and then they were disappointed through my 1 hour. So that's what's keeping me a little not online and promoting or putting out any other work. And I'm doing live shows. So that's what's happening right now. And the experience was, of course, incredible to be amongst, I think, about 18, 20 comics, both judges and the contestants. It was 3 months that just got over way too quick.
Okay. Um, so the next question I have is, see, comedy is very subjective, right? So as you said, now probably few of them watch your comics on, and then when they're watching you live, they're coming and saying that was good, right? So and a lot of comedians, they do have their own theory of comedy, right? So what's your comedy theory, or let me ask you in this way, what's your definition of comedy? Is it just making people laugh, or is it telling an uncomfortable story and, you know, making them laugh? Or what do you think comedy is for you?
Ah, that's okay. So very, like, it seems like a simple question, but it isn't. Um, Anything that makes you laugh without you realizing that you're about to laugh, to me, is comedy. Um, like, laughter is actually like a knee-jerk reaction that happens when you hear something incredibly funny. If you nod along and then laugh, then you're more agreeing with the person than laughing. So comedy to me is something that is said, um, like like some comedians can say what they have to say and get the people to react in the shortest number of words. In my head, comedy is me trying to talk to the audience and trying to get them to react with laughter without them knowing it that they're laughing. Only when they laugh, they realize that they are laughing. That's the best part to me. And as you said, comedy is subjective, which is great, because when a lot of people can get the joke and they're laughing uncontrollably, there is someone who doesn't get the joke and they're like, I don't know what's wrong with this person. He's laughing hysterically. That's the fun of going up on stage and saying things that you believe in and that you think are funny. There are times when even I have said something that is a popular phrase or a reference point for people to connect, and then they laugh because they know that reference point. But there are jokes where you say something that is universal, or you say something that is a sentence that does not have any reference, and people laugh. Those jokes are stronger than jokes that are dependent on references that people should get. Because even when they get the reference, they are seeing what you connected with and they're laughing at the fact that that was intelligently done. But when something is funny, you don't have time to process all of it. You laugh and then you realize that you're laughing. So it goes back and forth. Uh,
Okay. Yeah. Finally, the last question I have for you is, what are your top three suggestions or recommendations if someone is planning to or just getting started in this place? How do you welcome them to this club through your experience?
First thing is, don't take what another comedian is saying seriously at all, because all they'll do is tell you things that you should probably avoid before you get up on stage. That is my suggestion number one as a comedian. The second suggestion is, get up on stage as often as you can. And the third suggestion is, whatever you think is funny, talk about that. Don't try and add, or don't try and make something funny. Sometimes you'll be sitting and you're all like, cough syrup. Let me try and see if I can make something funny about cough syrup. No, if you find something funny, talk about that. That's where you work, and that's what you make better. And over time, when you start thinking about talking about something, after 6 months, the whatever you were trying to say completely changes. But that's still a very essential part of what you want to say. So just the number of open mics you can do, the number of times you can get up on stage, will teach you everything that you have to know for you to try stand up.
Okay. So where do we hope to see you next? What are your next projects or what are you planning about?
Well, I'm very seriously considering, and this is still in the planning phase. I'm planning to do a tour to some of the hill stations in India, and that'll be something that I'll work on next as soon as everything opens up. Other than that, just shows lined up, a couple of festivals later in the next year, and hopefully on one of the platforms that can carry whatever I'm saying to a lot of people. Hopefully, something will come out so that I can show what I've been doing for the last 2 years.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And wishing you all the best and hoping to see a lot more from you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Maitri. I appreciate this. It's a great initiative, and thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah. My pleasure. Thank you.